Thank you. I would like to make a few introductions. As everyone in the room knows, this has never been a political body. That would be totally inappropriate. I'd like to begin by introducing my friends from the Ukraine. So, come on. Loosen up, people. On a serious note, it is a privilege to recognize the reasons we are here in the first instance, and that is the justices of the Florida Supreme Court. To begin with, I'd like to recognize Chief Justice Charles Canady, Justice George Labarga, Justice Alan Lawson, Justice Carlos Muñez, and unfortunately, Justice Polston can't be here this evening. Also would like to introduce a person who's familiar to many, many people in this room, and that is Supreme Court Marshal Lester Dawson. Former Justice Ken Bell. Former Justice Stephen Grimes. And former Justice Harry Lee Anstead. I mentioned that the numbers are running a little low right now, but on the positive side, it is a privilege to introduce Judge of the United States Court of Appeals of the 11th Circuit, Robert Luck. Senior United States District Judge Patricia Seitz from Miami, the Southern District. District Court of Appeal of the First District Judge Scott Makar. Retired judges of the First District Bob Benton. Peter Webster. James Jonas, and from the 7th District Court of Appeal, Emerson Thompson. I'm glad everybody's paying attention. That's good. That's good. Also, I want to mention something about Peter Webster. When he went to Ackerman, he would send these emails to his different staff, and he would say, "Are you available for lunch?" And he would make sure it said that this was not to be construed as tax advice. So, in any event, Florida Bar President John Stewart, Florida Bar President-elect Dory Foster Morales, Executive Director Josh Doyle, former Executive Director Jack Harkness, familiar to all of us. I'd ask all the former presidents of the Florida Bar to stand and be recognized. Ask the best former Florida Bar president to remain standing. From the American Bar Association, I think she's here, former President Martha Barnett. Former President Steve Zack. How's the clock doing on this stuff, huh? Chair of the Conference of County Judges, Circuit Judges, Angela Cowden, the Honorable Angela Cowden. And if we could ask all the circuit judges to stand and be recognized. chair of the Conference of County Court Judges, Steve Jewett, and who is this guy? Have the county judges to stand and be recognized. You think I'm done? The Chief Judge of the Division of Administrative Hearings, John Newton. And we're honored to have tonight members of the House of Representatives. If you would stand and be recognized. Is Representative Diane Hart here somewhere? You may have read Representative Hart was pushing for changes in the Constitutional Revision Commission and said, I believe I caught the quote correctly, that the problem wasn't with the constitution of the commission. It had to do with the people who had been appointed. And I took great offense at that until I talked to her, and she said she was referring to Fred Karlinski and Bill Schifino. And finally, we have FSU Law Dean Aaron O'Connor. Tallahassee City Commissioner Curtis Richardson. And Public Employee Relations Commissioner Kurt Kaiser, whom we all know. Where's Kurt? All right. Let me just say briefly that the true honorees who are here tonight were the ones recognized earlier today at the Supreme Court ceremony, and that is those who have committed to help people less fortunate than themselves and were recognized for going above and beyond the call of duty in that respect. And I will say, on a personal note, that a person named Sandy Dallenberg is up in the heavens looking down, applauding what you people did and were recognized for today. And I think that's... There are also a great many people in heaven now not taking Sandy's calls because he's going to ask them to do something that'll take them the next several years to do. And with that, let me reintroduce Jonathan Claussen for State of the Society. Jonathan.
Thank you, Hank. And I was neglected to mention earlier that thank you, Ed Geddes, for that wonderful singing performance earlier. So I'm just going to give a brief update on what the Historical Society has been up to for the last year. We've obviously had a few things happen in 2019. To say that 2019 was a busy year for the Society would certainly be an understatement. With the unprecedented change on the court came probably our busiest year ever. So the year began with the retirement ceremonies for former Justices Fred Lewis, former Justice Peggy Quince, and former Justice Barbara Perriente. The Society worked with the former justices to appropriately commemorate their decades of service to the court and to our great state. And those retirement ceremonies were held in each former justice's hometown, respectively, Miami, Tampa, and Palm Beach. So those events were very well attended, and we certainly appreciate everybody's support who came out and attended those events. And of course, with those retirements came the appointment of 3 new justices, albeit a little bit temporary in some cases. And so the Society again worked on the investitures of the new justices, and of course I'm talking about former Justice Lagoa, former Justice Robert Luck, and current Justice Carlos Muniz. The investiture for Justice Lagoa was held in May of 2019, and for the first time ever, a joint investiture was held in September of 2019 for Justice Muniz and Justice Luck. Again, very well attended and aptly commemorating those, the ascension of those justices to the court. Obviously, as we all know, with the appointment of Justice Lagoa and Justice Luck to the 11th Circuit, we're going to be welcoming 2 new justices in the coming weeks. And so the society is looking forward to working with those new justices to commemorate their position on the bench and their investitures in the future. One of the projects that the society undertook several years ago was to commission the portraits of each sitting justice. And we've decided to fast track the 3 portraits that were planned for Justice Luck, Justice Muniz, and Justice Lagoa. And so that way the new justices who come in won't have to wait as long to have their beautiful portrait hanging in the court. So another thing that the society embarked on in 2016, we embarked on a 5-year strategic plan in order to increase our membership, spread awareness of what we do, and spreading our mission of preserving the history of the court. And one of those missions was to go to a biannual magazine. And I'm proud to say that in this spring we will be producing our 2nd magazine of this year. So that is something that we've been looking forward to producing for a very long time, and that is going to become a reality this spring. As part of that 2nd edition of the magazine, we're going to be working closely with the Florida Bar and celebrating their 70th anniversary. And that's something that the society is certainly looking forward to, assisting the bar, becoming more involved with the annual convention this summer, and again, commemorating that historical milestone of 70 years. As we have a great board of trustees. We have 8 working committees. We have, our board is very, very involved. We are a working board, and I appreciate, and the society certainly appreciates our board of trustees and the amount of time, energy that they selflessly give to the inner workings of what we do on a day-to-day basis. As part of the committees that we do have, we have an acquisitions committee, and we're certainly looking to continue bringing in historically relevant artifacts and papers. We have an oral histories committee, which again is tasked with preserving those of us in leadership positions and former justices for future generations. So I want to thank everybody here for coming tonight. We certainly appreciate the support. We certainly couldn't put on an event like this without you. We couldn't have had the year that we had in 2019 in supporting the court and the changeover, so to speak. And so we certainly appreciate everybody coming out to those events and again coming out tonight. We couldn't accomplish the mission of the society without your support. So thank you very much, and I appreciate everybody being here tonight.
A quick message to everyone in the society from a trustee or trustees of the society with respect to Susan Rosenblatt, many of you whom you know, and you know Stanley also. We made the announcement last year that struggle she was in. For everyone's benefit, Stanley and Susan are the 2 greatest benefactors in history of this society. They stand by it and they support it beyond everybody's greatest imagination. She's back at Sloan Kettering. She's waiting for the marrow transplant to work as it should. She told me she had journeyed through in the past year Weill Cornell in New York, Moffitt, Miami ICU, back to Weill Cornell, and now she's back at Sloan Kettering and is in day 117 of the post-transplant efforts, hoping that it works. The difficulty is that she has many grandchildren, none of whom in the past year can see her because of the risk of infection, an entire year of that. But she has 9 children, and of those 9 children, in the last 365 days, not 1 hour in 24 hours a day has one of those children not been with her to stand by her. She looks for your support. She did say that her husband Stanley is the worst example of a caregiver she had ever seen. That he's incapable of providing anything that's useful, but that he is a great trial lawyer. So she sends her love, and we all hope she can rejoin us next year at this dinner. Now, Haverford College, Yale Law School, Holland and Knight, Lane Trone, the Florida House of Representatives, the United States Congressman. Interestingly, that many of you may not know, he served as chair of the House Judiciary Subcommittee on the United States Constitution. He has been on the Florida Supreme Court since the year 2008. He has served twice as Chief Justice. In Tampa about 10 months ago, for reasons I don't recall, he was introducing me, and he was saying these really nice things, and I said, I didn't know he drank, and I didn't know he drank at 9:30 in the morning. But he was saying all these nice things, and then he stopped and he paused at the end. He said, although he hasn't done as well as Jack Harkness. And I said to him then, and I say to him tonight, there was absolutely no reason to bring up Harkness's name in that introduction. It's my privilege to present to you the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Florida, Charles Canady.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here this evening. I want to begin by thanking all of you for being at this dinner and to thank everyone who plays a part in the Historical Society for all the things that the Historical Society does and for the important role, the ongoing important role of the Historical Society in the life of our court. I can't recount all the things. You've heard about some of those already, but the members of the court are deeply grateful for the contribution you make to the life of our court. And so this is a special occasion for those of us on the court. Now, as you've heard, we're going through another transition on the court. We had a transition last year. We're looking forward to getting the new justices. It is a good thing we have a quorum. We do have 5, so we're in business. We're operating. But we're looking forward to getting a full complement on the court and are eagerly awaiting the appointments that will be forthcoming. I want to mention briefly a couple of initiatives that the court has recently set in motion that are important not just for our court but for the whole justice system in Florida. Recently, the court authorized the formation of a work group of the Judicial Management Council. And on the Judicial Management Council, many of you might not even know what that is. And in the magazine, the last magazine that was published of the Society, I have an article in there about the Historical Society and about the Judicial Management Council. And you might find that of interest, and I appreciate all the people who work on the Judicial Management Council and contribute to helping us plan for innovation in the court system and helping us figure out the best way to provide justice for the people of this state. And it's a complex task, and we're always looking for better ways to do the important work we have to do for the people of Florida. But the work group that we authorized that I particularly want to talk about that operates under the auspices of the Judicial Management Council is the work group on improved resolution of civil cases. And in brief, this is a work group that we have asked to look at developing recommendations that would be designed to enhance civil case management process in order to deliver justice in a more timely, cost-efficient, and accountable manner, all the time, all the while mindful of the requirements of due process, which can never be taken out of the equation. But our court is focused on trying to figure out how we can get justice for people more expeditiously and appropriately. And so that's a major focus of the court, and this work group is going to be has been charged with making recommendations which will come back to the court for potential rules changes, potentially also legislative changes that we could take to the legislature and ask them to consider. The work group is composed of a number of people. I can't mention all of them. I do want to mention that on this work group, I'm very pleased that former Justice Ken Bell has agreed to serve. We also have on the work group former bar presidents Scott Hawkins and Gene Pettis. And we've got a number of other people with great experience, and we're looking for great things from this work group. The interim report of the work group will come to us in August, and the final report is due to the court by June 30th of 2021. Another thing I want to mention, another initiative that we've set in motion, has to do with the Florida Bar. We have asked, in consultation with bar leadership, we've asked the Florida Bar to form a study group to look at a wide range of issues related to the regulation of the legal profession in Florida. Look at our whole regulatory scheme, which, as you know, is complex and many-faceted, with a view to ensuring that that the regulations we have in place for our legal profession meets the needs of Floridians for legal services while also protecting against misconduct and maintaining the strength of Florida's legal profession. We want to do things that we can, the things that we can do to help get better access to justice. And to the extent that we have unnecessary barriers to that are part of our regulatory system, we want to examine that and see if we can make some adjustments. And so we've asked the bar to look at that. Now, this is a big project. It's a significant project. This is our responsibility for the discipline of the legal profession is an important part of the court's constitutional responsibility. And the court is very grateful to Bar President John Stewart for his leadership in this initiative. And the court is expecting the study group's final report to reach us by July 1 of 2021. So that's an important initiative. Now finally, and this is really finally, the judicial system in Florida has had a good week in the legislature. And the judges here, many of you are going to be familiar with what's going on. Others may also be aware of it. But in the legislature, in particular, in the appropriations process, a number of the courts and the branches' priorities are moving forward in the legislative process. They're moving forward in the bills advancing in both the Senate and House Appropriations Committees. And we're very grateful to the members of those committees and others in the legislature who have supported our priorities. And of course, it's not over yet. That we got a process that we have to go through here. But this is a very auspicious beginning for this legislative session. I want to thank everybody who has played a role in that. And our court is very grateful. In particular, I want to say in both appropriations bills that are moving forward now, there's money for a new courthouse in the 2nd District. And for those of you from the 2nd District, that is a big deal. We've been working on that for some period of time, but there's now money in both bills for that purpose. So we're very excited about that and deeply grateful. So that's my report from the court. Again, we thank you for your support for the Historical Society. And now I am so excited to be here again to have the opportunity to listen to Gilbert King. And we're grateful for the opportunity that he has to be here with him this evening. And so thank you very much.
To get to the program, allow me to introduce the former, he's going to like this, no, the wife of former Chief Judge of the 5th District Court of Appeal, Emerson Thompson. She served in the Florida Senate for 5 years. She serves currently in the House of Representatives. She has degrees from the University of Miami and from Florida State University, and it's my privilege to welcome up here the Honorable Geraldine Thompson.
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we are encouraged to go not wherever the path may lead, but to go where there is no path and to leave a trail. And I am privileged tonight, thank you. I'm privileged tonight to introduce a trailblazer, Gilbert King, who has tackled problems that Americans have long wanted to ignore. He has tackled issues of race, civil rights, the death penalty, cash register justice, violence, bigotry, corruption, and class belonging. In his first book, The Execution of Willie Francis, which was published in 2008, Gilbert King focused on race, murder, and the search for justice in the American South. He highlighted a case where court-appointed attorneys for Willie Francis during trial called no witnesses, offered no objections, and put up no defense for Francis, who was accused of murder. Francis was subsequently convicted by an all-white jury and sentenced to death. In his second book, Devil in the Grove, Thurgood Marshall, The Groveland Boys, and the Dawn of a New America, Gilbert King tackled lawlessness among those who were sworn to uphold the law in Lake County. He put a spotlight on Sheriff Willis McCall and revisited the trial of the Groveland Four and supported the case for exoneration of the 4 black men accused of raping a white woman in Groveland in 1949. One of the accused received a life sentence at the age of 16. Another fled and was shot and killed by a posse led by Sheriff Willis McCall. 2 others were shot by the sheriff as he transported them from Rayford Prison back to Groveland for a second trial which had been ordered by the United States Supreme Court. One died and the other lived to tell the story that the 2 of them were shot by the sheriff without provocation. Devil in the Grove was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for General Nonfiction in 2013. In 2014, I was contacted by members of the families of the Groveland Four and asked if I would introduce legislation to exonerate their relatives. They had asked our governor at the time to do that by executive order, and he took no action. He referred the case to the Attorney General, who also took no action. I filed the legislation in 2014, purchased 40 copies of Devil in the Grove, and gifted them to my fellow senators. Over the years, Gilbert King and I have traveled this path with regard to exoneration of the Groveland Four. We went to Groveland when the town council there urged exoneration of the Groveland Four. He and I stood on the floor of the Florida House of Representatives when the state issued an apology for the racial injustice done to the Groveland Four. Gilbert King and I attended the cabinet meeting in 2019 where the governor and the cabinet pardoned the Groveland Four. Over the years, with my husband, who's been introduced from the 7th District Court of Appeal, who's with me tonight, they created a whole another appellate level for him. But he and I have had the opportunity to spend a great deal of time with Gilbert King and to consider him among our friends. Gilbert King's third book, Beneath a Ruthless Sun, which was published in 2018, was named the best book of the year by NPR and the Washington Post. Beneath a Ruthless Sun exposes the corruption of racial bigotry and animus that hung over a community, a state, and a nation. King's research for the book allows readers to learn of the rape of a prominent white woman and to immerse themselves in the machinations of small-town residents who were intent on protecting her image and to spare her husband the indignity of having a wife who had reportedly been violated by a black man. A mentally impaired white teenager was sacrificed and committed without a trial to a mental institution for the criminally insane, where he languished for 2 decades. Gilbert King shone the spotlight on perversion of justice under Jim Crow in Beneath a Ruthless Sun. It's been shown in wound care that in order for healing to occur, you have to take the bandage off the wound. And this is what Gilbert King has done in his books regarding issues that we have generally not wanted to face. He has ripped the covering off the wound of racial animus, bigotry, and injustice so that our healing can begin. And so it is with great honor that I introduce my friend tonight. We are still working on the exoneration of the Groveland Four. We have an apology, we have a pardon, and a pardon is something that you give to someone who is guilty. And we want the innocence of the Groveland Four acknowledged and the slate wiped clean. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a trailblazer, my friend and fellow laborer in the struggle for social justice, Pulitzer Prize-winning author Gilbert King.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be back here. I came here 5 years ago, and it was really the start of a journey, I think, that's become clear about what Geraldine just talked about. And I'm going to just flip through and show you my latest book, the story of that, but really it's a continuation of this Groveland story and what it's like to go back into a community that has had a reign of 28 years from this excuse me, my voice is going on here. This sheriff who had a 28-year reign, and to look as a sociological study of this particular county as sort of a microcosm of what was happening in America at the time. And so coming here 5 years ago was such an honor then. It's still an honor today. I've met so many people that I consider friends, people I've come to trust over the years, to ask questions about Florida, history, law, and I consider myself somebody who, if I can continue to write books in Florida, I know you guys can provide the material, so I'm very happy about that. After I spoke here, somebody asked me a question and said, where did you graduate college? And I said, graduate's a tricky word. And I explained that I was two math credits short of graduating from the University of South Florida. And the person said, we'll take care of that. And I had no idea what he was talking about. A week later, I got a call from the president of USF saying, we're going to bestow on you an honorary doctorate degree. And so after 20-something years, I finally got a college degree. And of course, my mother said, that's not a real degree. I paid for a bachelor's degree. I said, I think there is another Dr. King who talks about civil rights, so I don't know, we need another one. But I'm going to walk you through this story. I like to think of it as a crime story, but really, as you know, people have read it, it's much more than a crime story. This is a story about America and where we were at the time in terms of race, law, equal justice, economics, everything. Those are the things that really interest me. And Florida was a really unique time. And so I think when I move you through this presentation, you will see how unique Florida is and remains. It's really important to understand this story that takes place in 1957, what was happening in America at the time. And of course, one of the most seminal moments, I think the most important civil rights decision was Brown versus Board in 1954. Probably the most important landmark decision of the country in that entire century. And what a lot of people don't realize is there was a reaction to that significant moment in history. And what you saw, the desegregation of the public schools, what you saw was a slide backwards, a cyclical slide back. Suddenly, you have the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. You have the birth of white citizens' councils popping up in 11 states, 300,000 members strong. This was the reaction to the Supreme Court decision to desegregate the public schools. And as you can imagine, the reaction in the South at the time was virulent. And you saw an increase in racial terror, bombings, reactions on public pressure to not send your children to these schools where they were going to be integrated. And so this was what was happening in the wake of Brown versus Board. This is a man named Bryant Bowles from Tampa, Florida. He started an organization in reaction to Brown, which was NAAWP, the National Association for the Advancement of White People. And he traveled around the country doing these rallies that just brought out thousands and thousands of people up and down the coast, all throughout the South. And he was basically urging everyone to resist this Supreme Court mandate of desegregation of public schools. And he was a very fiery speaker. He would hold up his daughter, his like 3 or 4 year old daughter, and say things like, "Do you think the day will come when I will send this flower child of Southern future womanhood into a school with Negroes? Gunpowder will burn before that day comes." And he would hold up his child and make these inflammatory speeches. And here he is in Lake County, appearing on the courthouse steps. Sheriff Willis McCall invited him, and he's making this speech, this impassioned speech. And if you read the newspaper accounts of it that day, he was basically bragging that he was able to not only attract 1,000 more members to the NAAWP in Lake County, but he also signed up 13 judges. So he was a powerful person at the time, and he was the spokesperson for the resistance to the desegregation of public schools. So now that you know what was happening in the time in the wake of Brown versus Board, you can look at this little story I'm about to tell you that takes place in the small town of Okahumpka, population in Lake County of about 250 at the time. If you remember, this little town of Okahumpka was also where the whole Groveland story took place, when the 17-year-old farm girl by the name of Norma Paget shows up on the side of a road outside this Berthoff's Cafe in Okahumpka. That starts the chain of events that ultimately leads to a U.S. Supreme Court case and Thurgood Marshall coming in to represent the Groveland boys who were falsely accused of this particular assault. There was also another case that was happening at the same time in the 1950s in the wake of Brown. And that case remarkably involved this man, Virgil Hawkins, also from Okahumpka, Florida. So here you have two cases that reached the U.S. Supreme Court in the wake of Brown versus Board, and they're involving two separate cases involving Sheriff Willis McCall, civil rights, and Lake County, all of it in Okahumpka. What I found actually shocking is studying the 1956 Florida primary for governor and what was happening in that race. At the time, and this was when the state of Florida refused to obey the mandate of the U.S. Supreme Court, Virgil Hawkins was the story of that 1956 primary, because at the time in Florida, the economy was absolutely booming. There was so much revenue coming in. There was a tax surplus. Agriculture was booming in Florida. The population was growing. resorts, agriculture, you name it. The defense industry started to build up with the space boom on the West Coast. So that took the economy of Florida off the table as a campaign issue. What it became focused on was Virgil Hawkins' admission to the University of Florida College of Law, and the second case was Governor Leroy Collins' decision to commute the sentence of Walter Irvin to spare him his life from the Groveland case. Those two cases became the focus of 1956 primary, and it was the only thing that really anyone was willing to talk about since economy was off the table. And you can see the reaction here. You can see on the Tallahassee Democrat on the right column talking about the campaign. These are the two big stories along the right. Collins' story about Walter Irvin and Virgil Hawkins. So these were the issues that were going on. So when I was doing a book talk in 2012, I went to the heart of Groveland, and I was a little bit nervous about it, I have to say, because it was the very first book talk I did with Devil in the Grove, and I decided for some reason to go right into Groveland. And as I'm walking to the community center, I remember thinking to myself, I really don't mind if nobody shows up tonight. I'm kind of nervous about this. I didn't really think this through. I knew that the community's feelings were still pretty raw about this case. And as I was standing outside the community center, a woman came running out to me, and lots of people milling about. She said, Mr. King, I'm so glad you're here. I think it's only fair that I warn you, we've had 2 death threats called in on you this evening for your talk. And my heart just absolutely sunk as my first book talk. And then she said to me, you have nothing to worry about. We called the Lake County Sheriff's Department. They're sending somebody over. And I remember thinking, lady, did you read this book? It turned into be one of the most interesting conversations because it lasted for 3 hours after the talk ended. People were just there, they wanted to talk about it. Older African Americans talked about being children when the National Guard came in. And while I was in the back signing books, this gentleman here sauntered up to me, looking pretty much like that. And he stuck his business card right in my face. And it said, Sheriff of Lake County. And I'm looking at this going, oh no, who is this? And I read his name, Noel Evie Griffin, whose tie I am actually wearing tonight. He gave me a Florida tie. But he approached me and he said, yeah, you got your book right. I was on the force and it's right. He goes, but there's another story and nobody wants to write about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. And he said, it's the story of this young man named Jesse Daniels. We framed this kid for a rape that he did not commit. It's a great shame to me personally that I never spoke up about it, but I'll tell you it. Somebody needs to write about this. And so he went on to tell me this story about this white, mentally disabled 17-year-old teen who was accused of this sexual assault in the small town of Oklahoma, and how he was railroaded because they did not want to give him a trial. And much to the victim who reported this sexual assault, much to her credit, she did not want to go forward with this. She said, I'm sticking to my story. I'm not participating in this. And so now they couldn't really have a trial. And so what did they do? They shipped him off to Chattahoochee without a trial and kept him there for 14 years. And so this was the story he was telling me. And he said, nobody's going to talk to you about it. This is involving a powerful family. This is not like the family you wrote about in Groveland. This involved powerful people in Lake County, and they do not want to talk about this case. And he said, but it needs to be told. And so I started working on it, started researching it, and sure enough, everything he was telling me was bearing out. I filed Freedom of Information Act requests. I was getting FBI reports, all there in the reports. Sadly, it all gets buried, never sees the light of day. And so a lot of these things were checking out. And so this is a photograph of him in 1957. And he went on to tell me, because I knew that the Sheriff's Department was not going to have maintained their records. So he became my source from within the Sheriff's Department. And he was telling me about his partners, the things they had done, how this conspiracy took place. And it was something that I had a really hard time believing until I started being able to corroborate it through the Department of Justice files. The story of Beneath the Ruthless Sun is the story of a powerful young couple. This is Joe Knowles, a powerful citrus baron, and his wife, Blanche Bosanquet Knowles, on their wedding. And in December of 1957, while Joe was away on business, Blanche reported that she was sexually assaulted in her home by a man she described as an African American with bushy hair and very dark complexion. And so you can see the very first news report that goes out, it's very small, Negro sought for attack on woman. That's the very first mention of this case. And this is how the case begins. Sheriff Willis McCall knows exactly what to do. He's been down this road before. He goes into Okahumpka and grabs just about every young black male and throws them in the car, brings them down to the jail, and just starts interrogating them. And one by one, they begin releasing suspects until they settle on the one young man from Okahumpka who's going to be the suspect in this case. And that was the nephew of Virgil Hawkins. And so they parade him out as the alleged attacker. Behind the scenes, Sheriff Willis McCall is bragging to his friends, powerful people of Lake County, that this is going to be the straw that breaks the back of Virgil Hawkins' attempt to desegregate the University of Florida College of Law. All of these headlines coming out with Virgil Hawkins' names, tying him to the sexual assault. This is going to be the end of his effort. And so this is how the case begins to turn in December of 1957. But then something strange begins to happen. You can see it here. Officials quiet on alleged rape case. People are beginning to wonder why in Lake County with Sheriff Willis McCall, why are they not charging the nephew of Virgil Hawkins for this crime? This would have been a no-brainer not too long ago, and now all of a sudden they've gone quiet. And a week later, after the assault, they release Melvin Hawkins, 18 years old, in the middle of the night without an apology, without any explanation, and send him home. And the next day they arrest 17-year-old Jesse Daniels and charge him with the sexual assault on Blanche Bosanquet-Knowles. Jesse Daniels is a 19-year-old kid who still sleeps in the room with his parents. They said he has, psychiatrists said he has the mind of a 10-year-old. He sleeps with a teddy bear, plays the guitar, and now all of a sudden he's being drawn into this case and thrown in jail. The very first thing they do is they hire the former state attorney who is since retired, and they appoint him the public defender. And they bring in the state attorney. The very first thing the state attorney does is write a letter to the doctors at Chattahoochee saying, "Between you and me, my client is guilty. Hold him indefinitely." And so without having to go through a trial that could have been very embarrassing for the entire community, and it spared Blanche Bosanquet-Knowles the opportunity to testify. It spared the husband the stigma of having to endure this case. They frame Jesse Daniels and send him off to Chattahoochee, where he stays for the next 14 years. Fortunately, in Lake County, there's a journalist by the name of Mabel Norris Reese. Mabel Norris Reese, if you've read Devil in the Grove, you see she starts out, she's basically the mouthpiece for the sheriff and for the state attorney. She's writing about how Norma Paget's honor must be avenged. And here's a drawing of 4 electric chairs just waiting for these defendants who are about to stand trial. And by writing this, you basically poisoned the entire jury pool in Lake County, which led to the Justice Robert Jackson writing the opinion, really blasting the media coverage in Lake County. That was pointed at Mabel Norris Reese. And I saw an interview with her later on in her career, and she said, "That was me. I deserved to be stepped on for what I was doing in that case." And she had an awakening. And that awakening, by reporting on the injustices of Sheriff Willis McCall, and one of the things that she began to write about was she began to write that this case made no sense, the Jesse Daniels case. And she began to investigate when nobody else would write about this and explore what she felt was a conspiracy to frame Jesse Daniels to prevent some kind of social stigma from happening in the social set of Lake County. And so she begins to write about this, and she's about the only one who's writing about this. Nobody else in journalism wants to even touch this case. You can see the reaction to Mabel's writing by writing about the reaction to Brown versus Board. She had a cross burned in her front lawn that nearly incinerated her house. She had 2 military bombs thrown at her house itself. Fortunately, she was not home at the time, so nobody was hurt. Her office at the Mount Dora Topic was vandalized. by the KKK that crosses, defaced the offices. Her dog, beloved dog, was thrown a strychnine steak, and they poisoned her dog. And the final straw in Mabel's case, after all these things, all these constant death threats while she was working in Lake County, was Sheriff Willis McCall's friends opened up a rival newspaper, a white supremacist newspaper called the Mount Dora Herald. And basically, Willis McCall went around the town warning all of Mabel's advertisers that if they knew it was good for them, they would not advertise in Mabel's paper. And that was the final straw. They ran her out of town. She had to move to Daytona Beach and become a columnist for the Daytona Beach News Journal at the time. And she had to leave Lake County, but she never stopped writing about Willis McCall. She was given permission by her publisher, the Davidsons, to continue to hold Willis McCall's feet to the fire, that this was still close enough to Lake County. And so that's what she did. And she continued to write about this. She became a great civil rights writer. She was a powerful voice in Daytona Beach, and her voice was beginning to spread throughout the state. And for years, she continued to write about this Jesse Daniels case and how this innocent man was lingering at Chattahoochee without a trial. One of the things that Mabel covered was the unrest in St. Augustine, 1964, where you had these wade-ins in the public beaches, and every day there would be attacks. The Klan would just converge on the protesters, and there would be beatings every day. This was covered in newsreel footage every night. It's on the news in the summer of '64. The famous scene where Martin Luther King shows up at the Monson Motor Lodge while they're doing a wade-in the Monson Motor Lodge pool. And what you don't see in this photograph is here's a picture of the wade-in, and the manager of the Monson is taking muriatic acid and pouring it into the pool while this wade-in is going on. And so these are the images that are being shown across the country. It's showing Florida in a very different light that many people had realized. What you don't see in this photograph, this is the parking lot outside the Monson Motor Lodge. The Klan had showed up, and they were basically in pickup trucks with alligators in the back of the trucks. And they said, if the acid doesn't get them out of the pool, the gators will. So this was the environment that was happening in St. Augustine during that horrible summer of 1964. Martin Luther King came down. This is him being arrested. Famous photograph with the dog thrown in the back with him. And his house, bullets later burned down right after he left. And Mabel Norris Reese was writing about this and interviewing Martin Luther King and talking about this. I think the reason that Mabel was doing this is because she had experience dealing with the Klan and powerful Willis McCall back in Lake County. And so she was sent to sort of try to understand this, to present the events in St. Augustine. And here's a picture of Haas Manussi, who was really the leader of the Klan in St. Augustine at the time. And interestingly enough, I found an interview with him, and somebody had asked him, how did the other media, the reporters, deal with you in St. Augustine? And his answer was, oh, those were good boys, and many of them were contributing to our cause as they were writing about this. And he said, the only one who gave us any trouble was this woman in Daytona Beach. She was a headache constantly. And that was obviously Mabel Norris Reese, who continued to write about this. But she also continued to write about the Jesse Daniels case. This is a photograph of Mabel later on, just a real badass reporter. She really is somebody who risked it all, life and property. Another hero that emerges, and I think some of you have read my books, it's really the lawyers, the legal community. Heroes do emerge, and this was Richard Graham, the Legal Aid Society, Legal Aid in Daytona Beach. Jesse's mother, who was this poor watermelon picker in Lake County, her house was burned down. She too was chased out of Lake County. She decided to move with her friend, Mabel Norris Reese, and live nearby. And Mabel said, there's a young lawyer at Legal Aid you should visit. And Jesse's mother began to tell the story about Jesse Daniels. And Richard Graham decided to take the case. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, but when he looked into it, he did. His case made it to the Florida Supreme Court. It was a 4-1 decision. But when he called, he actually got on the phone with Richard Irvin, who who at the time was a justice, former attorney general. And Ervin had written the dissent in this case. And Ervin was aware of Lake County from prior dealings, and he had friends in law enforcement who knew about Willis McCall. He was aware of this case. And so when he wrote his dissent, he obviously 4-1 loss. He got on the phone with Richard Graham, and Ervin told him, keep going with this case. You're right, we are wrong on this. And so at that point, Graham decided to file habeas corpus with the US Supreme Court. Remarkably, he's in his 20s. It's really his first job out of law school. And here he is filing a case with the US Supreme Court. 2 months after he filed, an order to show cause came back to Lake County. And so now this case begins to get some momentum. Now there's going to be hearings. The Supreme Court decides that there needs to be a hearing about whether or not Jesse Daniels can have a trial. And that begins the legal side of this case that had not been explored before. Automatically thrown into Chattahoochee without a trial. Now they were moving towards getting justice. And it was all because Richard Graham was thinking pretty big for a young man at the time. I won't go into too much of the, I don't want to spoil it because I know some of you have not read it, but you can see in the subhead, it's Justice Lost and Found. So I think you know where this might be going. But I can tell you that Mabel Norris Reese stays on this case and stays on Willis McCall. And ultimately, the 28-year reign of Sheriff Willis McCall in Lake County is brought to an end, a lot of it due to the reporting of Mabel Norris Reese. Here you can see Jesse Daniels, age 33, finally released from Chattahoochee. Because there was never a trial, the legal story plays out in the Florida legislature. And there's a special master who comes in and says it's our job to determine whether or not Jesse Daniels is guilty or innocent of this crime. And they put together a remarkable case, not quite a criminal trial, but every bit as dramatic. And you'll see some of the machinations and when the conspiracy begins to come to life in those legislative hearings. And Mabel Norris Reese is basically proved right, her reporting on this conspiracy. And there you see Jesse Daniels with his mother Pearl playing a guitar. And there, a photograph in Life magazine of his arch nemesis, Willis McCall, the high and mighty sheriff. One of the interesting things that happened in this case was in the early 70s when relief was finally brought in the Jesse Daniels case, there was a legislator down in South Florida who decided to get involved in reforming mental health rights. And so that was Maxine Baker. And Maxine Baker admitted that the Jesse Daniels case was one of the main cases she thought of when she thought of putting together this bill to revamp. And here you see Maxine Baker, and obviously the Baker Act is named after, it became a model. One of the most important things that many other states picked up was the rights of the mentally ill who are accused of crimes and what their rights are to counsel, to hearings. Many of those things were part of the Baker Act that was adopted throughout the country. Talking about some of the people I've been able to speak with over the years that continue to inspire me, Sandy Dalembert. I had the pleasure of speaking with him about this. Obviously, he came from Chattahoochee. Mental health and law were really issues that were really important to his life. And I was able to interview him about this case and about mental health law. And he told me this story that I just found so interesting that I'll share it with you now. He talked about the Baker Act and the legislation that came his way. And he basically said to me that, you know, the way the bill was written, it really wasn't the strongest. And he said, but I had this young staff attorney working for me, a brilliant writer. I said, can you rewrite this? She rewrote it, and it was passed immediately. And he said, and that staff attorney was Janet Reno. So, yeah. So Sandy Dalembert is somebody I think about a lot. He's one of the warmest, most informative people I've ever met here in Florida. And I'm sure many of you, as Hank mentioned earlier, have the same fond recollections. I'll just go back because I think the last time I was here, you heard Geraldine talking about it earlier, I wasn't able to really talk about this case because it didn't have the ending. It's still not quite over. But going back to the Groveland case, because of Senator Thompson, Representative Thompson's efforts to make this story well known within her colleagues, more and more people started reading the books. and were inspired to do something. And the bill, a claims bill, finally had a co-sponsor, and it began to get momentum. And as Geraldine talked about, we were able to show up for the apology and for the pardons here in Tallahassee. And it was one of the most inspiring moments, I think, of that I'll ever experience in my life. And one of the main reasons was to see how quickly it came together. People like Chris Hand, who are here today, instrumental bringing Leadership Florida into this effort. There was so many more people involved in this effort, and it began to get some momentum politically, legislatively, and all of a sudden, about a year ago, I went back down to Tallahassee and was in that clemency board hearing, and Governor DeSantis said this was going to be one of the first issues that he tackled, along with Nikki Fried and the others, Ashley Moody and Jimmy, yes, him. They were good to their word. I think DeSantis was in office maybe 2 days, and all of a sudden, we're at this clemency board, and this is on the, we literally thought it was just going to be an agenda-setting meeting, and they got right to it. And Norma Paget, who you see in this photograph as a 17-year-old girl, she showed up against the belief of just about everybody there to testify about whether or not the Groveland boys should be pardoned. Norma Paget was somebody who has not spoken in 70 years about this case. I tried to interview her maybe 10 years ago for the book, and her message to me was, let sleeping dogs lie. She didn't want to revisit this. But now she showed up at that clemency board meeting, stuck to her story, and it was a very powerful moment. And I remember I actually testified as well. And one of the things I wanted to be clear was that this case, this pardon, should not be determined on a he said, she said kind of story. The reason that this pardon should be considered by the clemency board is because of what happened to the Groveland boys in that trial. The perjury, the manufacturing of evidence, the prosecutorial misconduct. These were the things that I thought were the great injustices that needed to be addressed. And it was spelled out very clearly in the FBI reports that were buried for 60-something years. When I filed a Freedom of Information Act request, I was the first person to see these files. They had never been opened. The defense never saw these. The FBI agents were imploring the U.S. attorney to file charges against the sheriff and his deputy for murder and attempted murder, and it was quashed. It was quashed for 4 words: tranquility of the South. That shows up in a report. In other words, if people really knew what was happening in this story, they might riot in the streets. And so all of this was quashed. And so that is the thing that I wanted to be addressed by that clemency board. And I think their immediate decision spoke truth to power at that moment. That was what they were addressing. The justice system at the time in Florida did not serve the interest of justice. And this is an image. It was in the New York Times Magazine. This is actually 2/3 of the story. The apology was there, the pardons were there, the exoneration is something that's coming next. And one of the things that I really think that this is important and something that Florida should be proud of was the bipartisan effort to correct a past injustice. Why do these issues matter? Somebody I have with me today, Shelley Thibodeau, who's the director of the Conviction Integrity Review Unit in Jacksonville. There are now, I believe, 4 units like this in Florida, down South Florida, Tampa, Jacksonville, and Orlando. The important work that they're doing to maintain the integrity of the judicial system cannot be stated enough. Shelley, through her work, has a way of doing sort of something similar that I do. I'm not restricted by the appeals and the narrow guidelines of appeals. I can go back and examine the entire narrative once again. And I think that that's the important thing to realize about these units. When we interviewed Shelley about this, she talked about the importance about this. And one of the quotes that I'll never forget is she said, us lawyers, we sue doctors all the time. We sue the makers of products that are defective and injure the public. Why can't lawyers have their work looked at and examined? And who better to do this than the prosecutor's office, the state attorney's office. And so that is a really important thing that's happening, whether it's the Clemency Board and the state of Florida looking back at these past cases and recognizing these injustices. They improve the integrity of the courts today. They really do have a lasting impact. And so on that note, I want to finally have a moment to say that something great has happened, even though the job is not finished. That is something that I think Florida should be extraordinarily proud of, is really being on the forefront of this effort throughout the South and throughout America. So I'm going to read one more thing to you, and then I'm told I want to open it up to questions, and I hope I still have a voice to do that. But I just wanted to read this. Something I wrote recently just thinking about this, and in the Historical Society. As a writer of historical nonfiction, my work, and the work of other historians more accomplished than me, is as much a review of our American selves as it is of the record. The benefits of historical writing, the taking of time to review what has happened through the surviving record, to contemplate anew the possibilities of alternative explanations previously discarded or never born, to consider the pressures, the strains of reasoning, and how that reasoning is tethered to the emotions of the historical actors and our American life of that time, is the value, if not the purpose, of historical writing, and by extension, the reading, the digestion of history. And through history, we can decide among the tossed salad of influencers that led to the outcomes under examination, what is ephemera and what do we wish to endure. Even sometimes, if we are lucky enough and timely enough, we can ask, what can we correct? What can we fix? What flaws in our past actions compel us to continue to participate in the history making of these specific events? We need history because we are not perfect, because we are human. To write and read history well, objectively, tempered by both dispassion and compassion, not only explicates the truth of past events, but improves our present. It will improve our democracy, purify our acumen in proceedings ongoing, and accelerate the quality of justice that underlies our living democracy, whether we are seeking the unrealized justice of the past or the uncovered justice of tomorrow. The only circumstance when history doesn't matter is when the present isn't worth fighting for. So on that uplifting note, I will turn to questions. If anybody has any questions, happy to take them. Thank you. And please accept my apologies for this voice, but the content will be there, I'm sure.
I have a question.
Let's hear.
So what do we do, there's a lot of brilliant minds in here this evening, what do we do when we want to make sure that these wrongful conviction integrity units are not just window dressings? For example, right now we've got a Hillsborough County State Attorney, Andrew Warren, who claims that he has overturned 17 wrongful convictions recently. There has been multiple people in the Tampa Bay area that has done Chapter 119 public records requests. And to this day, he refuses, I'll repeat that, he refuses to give us the names and case numbers of those 17 wrongful convictions that he supposedly overturned. This has been a very moving night for me. My name is Joshua Staten. I'm with Florida for Transparency. You moved me tonight. This is a big case. If you were to overturn 17 wrongful convictions, what do you think that you'd want the public to know the names of those cases, the names of those victims? Because they were victims. What do you want to know the case style? What is he hiding? And what can we do to make sure that wrongful conviction integrity units are truly what they say they are and not just a window dressing? Because it seems like at least in Hillsborough County, with the state attorney Andrew Warren, that's what we've got. And it's very disturbing. So I just would like to know in front of everyone here, I wouldn't know better, who better to ask the Florida bars, judges, and lawyers, because it's very disturbing to many of us.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's probably a little bit above my pay grade, but without being a total coward on that. Are you talking about Marcy's Law? Is that one of the things you're talking about when the names are not released? Are you referring to that?
Well, when the state attorney proudly went on national television and said, I've overturned 17 wrongful convictions, my name's Andrew Warren. We all said, please, can you give us the names of those that you freed?
Yeah.
Give us the case style. And he refuses to release that information, so we're
Okay.
assuming that they don't exist. But
Yeah.
people should know, and you should be bragging about it if you've done that.
Right. I wish I could tell you I'm more familiar with that case. I don't really know about that. And so 17 cases. I mean, I promise you I will look into it. And if you email me, I will try to find out what I can. Okay. Thank you very much. Best I could do with that one. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, you said you tried to interview Norma Paget 10 years ago unsuccessfully. You tried to talk to her again at the Clemens Award here.
You know, I did not. She was surrounded by her family members. I got the impression from body language that I wasn't really welcome to go over there. I was standing like 5 feet away from her, and somebody told me that they were watching her and her hand was clenched on the chair while I was speaking. And I really did not talk about, and that was one of my main things. I did not want to make this about her, because I'll tell you why. I think she should have talked to me. I was the most sympathetic person probably to have talked to her since that time. I really wanted to understand what it was like to have lived through this tremendous case. I always felt that it was the men in her life who had really put this story in place. She was to play a particular role, and as a 17-year-old girl, she was not empowered to be the power person in this story. As soon as this happened, her husband put the story in place. It became the sheriff's story, the state attorney's story, her father's story, who was, bent for justice on this. It was no longer Norma Paget's story. And if you look at these kind of cases throughout the South, you see the same thing. It starts with an accusation, but it quickly moves over to law enforcement and the prosecutor's office. And it's a way of housekeeping. And I never thought that Norma Paget was really the person, the devil in the grove of this story. I blame the men in this particular story who had all the power, and they were the ones that made the choices to pervert the justice system. So, but I would like to talk to her someday if you know anybody. Yes, Mary.
What is your next project?
A couple ones, but I think the most important one is I'm working on one in Polk County, and it's actually a podcast, and it's looking at the criminal justice system through one case, and exploring the role of the state attorney, the defense attorneys, the appellate system, law enforcement, and just looking back into the 1980s to see how all this was handled at a time. And because we've had incredible access to so many interesting people like Hank Cox, like Shelley, judges, the trial judges agreed to speak with us. We've talked to the state attorney. We've talked to witnesses, jurors, and just going back and sort of re-examining and sort of looking at the narrative from a different perspective. That's really the project, without getting into specifics. Yes. Well, I'll be out here in the lobby probably till 3 or 4 in the morning. Happy to talk.
Mr. King, Mr. David Barksdale and I have known you for some time now, and we appreciate your being here and what you have to say. And I know everyone else does too. Judge Luck, we wish you the best. Godspeed. We're so proud of you. And to all the pro bono recipients, I will echo what Mr. King said and what I said earlier. And for everyone else, if you have a moment, go read up on what Sandy Dallenberg did for this society and what he meant. Thank you.